Thank you for being here, Amy. We're just going to jump right in and ask our most burning questions. And so, as a chaplain and doula and lifelong educator, and director of the Institute, what would be the most important thing you've learned or you'd like to share with our listeners about the lessons of letting go?
Well, it's a really great question, and I'm so glad that you're reflecting on it with me. I think of it as a lifelong inquiry. Every moment is a beginning and ending. Every moment is a birth and death. So we have ample opportunity to practice. And sometimes what is needed is holding on and not letting go, right? And so it's that balance of what to hold on to and what to release. Even as a mother watches her child grow, there's a lot of holding on and letting go. Mm-hmm. In our intimate relationships, in sexual energy, in honest communication about hard topics, there's letting go and holding on. Mm-hmm. And also, I believe right now in the world, with regard to the environmental struggles we're facing, what do we hold on to? What values guide us? And what can we release? I think of it as a dialectic where you have two truths and they are connected. There's the radical acceptance of what is, and that's very hard. There's a lot of grief in what is often. And then there's the sincere effort and honest effort to change things for justice and for compassion. So that dialectic is where I live a lot. I think that this tension, this creative tension, is a part of human life. So what I would want people to think about is how that dialectic is showing up in their own lives, in their relationship to their own body as it ages, as it moves through different stages. I think, for instance, I teach a course through the Institute called Rituals of Menopause. And being with women through menopause and myself going through perimenopause and menopause, it's a lot of letting go, but there's also some holding on. And there's that creative place where new things come, a new chapter begins. So with birth, there's death, and with death, there's birth.
Yeah, that's beautiful. It's active all the time. If we're paying attention to it, it's bringing it to consciousness.
May I ask? So when there's death, there's birth, and that's so beautiful. Yet so many people resist that. How do we help people let go of resisting that if they don't believe that there's a birth after, there's something after?
Can I add one thing to Maureen's question? It's kind of like when she just said that, it seems like it's fear is a big obstacle in that as well.
Maureen, when you speak about death, are you right now considering death of the body as the primary form of death?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about now. Yes, death in the form of the body.
So as a hospital chaplain, I've worked with families who have a wide range of views about what might be after death. Mm-hmm. And some have a real strong conviction that this life is the life that we know. And when the brain stops functioning, consciousness stops, and there's no more self to pass on to. And I've seen families with that perspective die with great dignity and support. So I don't know if a belief in birth after death, like a literal place that we might go to a heaven or a new life, is needed to work with fear. But I do think if we think of birth as symbolic and perhaps death as symbolic, they always are in dialectic. So let's say that I was at a death with a woman who was a poet and her husband was a physicist, and they both were atheists. And she sat with me in the room next to his where he was dying for a moment, maybe an hour, and just spoke about her love for him. And she cried, and her poetry and her remarkable gratitude for having married him. and how hard it would be to say goodbye. And she didn't believe she'd see him again, and she didn't believe there was a place that they'd go. It's just this real, honest, I love him, I'm grateful, this is hard. And there's a new birth of a chapter in her life that's coming without him. And perhaps people, as you say, struggle letting go because love links us. Love is an energy that connects, and it's hard to release people you've spent decades connecting to. And that's to be honored, I think. Yeah. And so, Colleen, when you mention fear, I know what fear feels like for me. It's a tightness in my belly. It's a metal taste in my mouth. It's not sleeping well at night. It's headaches in the back of my head, especially. And I think fear for me can be a really helpful teacher because it can teach me if I'm in danger. You know, I was in my book, Holding Space, I described being attacked on a train and how my body knew I was in danger before my mind picked it up. And I've done some good reading on this. And part of that is that when people are aggressive, they release pheromones of aggression that you smell. So the body can smell that it's in danger. Isn't that fascinating?
So fascinating.
Yeah.
Even if the person is smiling at you. And so I think fear can be an ally. I don't think it's always something that we have to overcome or push away. Fear, that kind of body fear, I think can be a good ally. It can also be a great indicator of where trauma might live in the body. So if I'm with a person who I do believe is safe and suddenly I'm feeling afraid, I wonder what was the triggering event that made my core regulatory network start to panic or start to feel anxious or start to feel worried. And death is a really big unknown. And since we are pretty death phobic and in many ways grief illiterate as a culture, I think there's a lot of trauma that's not processed around grief. So when families face the death of people they love, it can bring up the death of people they've loved before that really didn't get grieved well.
Right.
So that's kind of a long-winded reflection. I don't necessarily have answers, but I have thoughts. And just you can take those thoughts and put them with your thoughts. And over time, find your wisdom.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Beautiful. I know, so it's kind of working with these two tensions, like what you were speaking of just beautifully. What practices do you have in place for you that help sustain your ability, to show up and let go in your own life? And then do this remarkable job that you do showing up for others?
Well, that's a really good question. And I'm 48, so I've had a few years of practicing, like which self-care practices allow me to stand in that creative tension, that dialectic. I have found yoga, the practice of yoga and the teaching of yoga to be super helpful. I teach tonight, for instance, and I get to spend time with wonderful people breathing and moving in their bodies. I have found dialectic behavioral therapy, DBT therapy, the study of that, friends of mine who have focused on that for their PhD level work, to be a really insightful way of looking at life. That was founded by a woman named Marsha Linehan, and she had borderline personality disorder and brought through her intellect and her heart a method of, you could say, healing herself, but it didn't change the disorder. It just allowed her to hold that dialectic, because borderline is very much like it's black or white.
Right.
And this is a dialectic of both. And she's also a Zen Buddhist, so there's a lot of Buddhism in that practice. I have found massage therapy to be very helpful. I have found art and dance to be extraordinarily helpful. I think dance for me and yoga have been the primary piece. Healthy relationship, healthy partnership. The Gottman Institute's work around communication and looking at the relationship like a house and how healthy are the structures in your house. So my partner and I completed level 1 Gottman training for therapists, and he's in mental health. I am a chaplain. I'm not a mental health therapist at this point. However, taking that training with a whole group of mental health therapists was so fascinating. And a lot of it is that dialectic, because Gottman Institute teaches around 70% of conflict in a couple will never be resolved. The topics, like if there's a constant fight about money, or the mother-in-law or the father-in-law or the kids, like these dialectics that they don't resolve, but what you can do is help people approach them differently. Isn't that fascinating?
Yes. Yes.
So I think those things have been helpful. So I just listed a bunch of things that I also don't drink alcohol, very rarely. I try to stay present in my body and mind. And I think that also helps me in the work of being awake to dialectics.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. Well, you're speaking to 3 Seattleites, so we have Gottman and Marsha Linehan here. So we love them. And one of my lessons in learning with Marsha Linehan that I just think is amazing was if you hold your palms up, it's very difficult to stay in fierce anger. And it's a practice that she just automatically, it just feels so simple, but what a beautiful way of, I like how you went through pretty much all these different facets of your life to be thinking about, that all of us could take some pause. And then I also loved what you said, is that experimentation to finally land where it works for you. And I think of dancing and singing and movement, so that you can move some of that grief. We know that about trauma. Yeah.
Right. The work of Dr. Bruce Perry has been really helpful to me. And he writes about 4 methods of integrating trauma. One is community, healthy community. One is ritual, which involves a rhythm, like dance, song, especially in community, very healing, very powerful. The third is meaning making meaning of our struggle. And the fourth he calls plant-based medicines, which is the ability to, through our nutrition, but also even perhaps through psychedelics. It's not something I've experienced directly in a therapeutic way, but I know that Gabor Mate is an advocate, and more scholars are advocating the use of psychedelics in a safe dimension for people to kind of rewire their core regulatory networks when it comes to certain almost intractable trauma in the body. So he's inspiring. I feel like I'm a constant student. The Institute, I created a school so I could be a constant student and hang out with really smart people like you 3.
Yes, death doulas, we feel that way. We're very much constantly learning. I know, Colleen, you had some questions. She just talked about meaning making. I know you had a question about that.
One of the things, Amy, that is really, I love this topic of letting go, because it's the one that I wrestle with constantly every day. And I'm wondering what keeps us from experiencing a moment to hold space versus wanting to explain away everything. As humans, we fill our mind with explanations constantly. And I think the thing is what is it like to experience something and just let it be? I mean, I constantly struggle with that. And I know I'm not alone.
So just before I speak, let's pause and be for a minute. Let's practice what you're saying. So I suggest hand to the heart for a moment. This is called heart-centered breathing. It helps calm the nervous system. It comes from the work of Dr. Laura Markham in New York. Just let the eyes close. Soften the muscles around the eyes and the mouth. And feel into all dimensions of self with breath. So there's breath in the body, breath holding thoughts, breath being moving through emotion. And breath in the mystery we might call spirit or soul. And as you breathe, notice that inhale lengthening, the exhale lengthening. And take one more deep breath in and out. Before the eyes open, rub the hands together, create some fire, some warmth, some juice and love between your palms, and then place them wherever on your body, belly, chest, back of the head, wherever extra positive energy, emotion could benefit you. And then open the eyes slowly.
Thank you. That was so beautiful.
Right. Wonderful.
Yeah, so it's easy to jump into the mind. I substitute teach school right now, and we really train ourselves in our culture to really be in the mind a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Kids aren't in their body unless they're doing sports, but there's not a lot of mindfulness in the body, connect into emotion. It's about learning in a certain way and moving in a way, and it's pretty competitive on both elements. So perhaps the struggle you're describing is something that's not you and me alone. It's how we were and how we all, a lot of us are raised. And to just slow down and breathe is a medicine for that kind of over accentuation of the mind and meaning making. It's important, but it's not the only important thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That was beautiful.
Thank you for joining me. I thought it was beautiful too.
Yeah, taking that time is so important. I know that we are getting close to time. I'm wondering, is there any last questions that anyone has before we get closing thoughts from Amy?
You know, there is one thing that you've touched on, but as end-of-life doulas, death doulas, we're all about, and I said it earlier, helping people let go. So, you know, what have you learned about how people live their lives and how they let go at the end of their life? Is there anything that you see a pattern or anything that could help end-of-life doulas really connect with those they're working with and the families on letting go?
I wonder if that dialectic could be something, could be the source of a conversation with the dying person or the family. You know, what's important to hold on to, and what can we release? Because I think part of the fear of like just letting go is my legacy's gone, my personality's gone, my body's gone, my love is gone, my family's gone, my finances are gone, my control is gone.
Yeah.
All of it is gone, gone, gone. And I am not convinced yet that death means it's all gone. It means there's a huge transformation, and there's a significant release. And I think it's possible that there's also a deep holding on, because people I've loved who've died have visited me in dreams, have been with me and when I drive my car to work. They're in my heart, they're in my mind, and it's not because I have a problem letting go. So I wonder if death doulas spent time in that dialectic of what for this family is important to hold on to, and what for this family is important to release. And I think that might help the dying person feel held.
It's beautiful.
You know, as you say that, I have a friend that asked her father the day that he died, how would you like us to remember you and know that you're near? And he said, dragonflies. Every time you see a dragonfly, know I'm near you. I'm with you. I'm there with you. And so whenever she sees a dragonfly, she knows her dad is there. So, you know, she had the courage to ask her dad that question that gave her this beautiful gift.
Oh, I love that story.
It's beautiful.
Mm.
And Amy, how do you keep your faith alive in love? You know, we've talked about that love connecting all of us. And that's, I think, one of the hardest things is to think about that active love, that physical love, being able to hug and kiss and hold and, you know, see one another changes when we die. What helps you with your faith in the work that you do? I'm just going to put a plug in for your book because it just is, it's weaved, rich, full, along with a lot of humbleness on your part that is really rich. So, but I would just love to hear where you're at now.
Well, I struggle. I think we struggle. I struggle. I'll say I struggle with the immensity of grief, especially when there's loss that's connected to what I would call injustice.
Mhm.
All these Russian soldiers lately just sent to slaughter in Ukraine, and all these Ukrainians navigating what it's like to be in cities with bombs falling on their heads. I don't even know how to imagine that fully. I've never lived close to that. So I think a big test, if I flew to Kiev and spent a month, and then you asked me that question. So I try to remember my responses are woven into a life that has not known significant violence. I've known injustice. I felt touched by injustice, and I think what's hard around your question about keeping faith alive is sometimes grief can feel like it breaks everything in the house, even the faith. And so what is unbreakable for each person is uniquely understood. What is unbreakable for me so far has been this deep faith in the reality of love. It doesn't mean there's not hate, and it doesn't mean there's not injustice, but that love is also real. And if I align myself with that, I will be able to navigate the hardships without becoming hardened.
Mm. Beautiful. We could talk with you forever.
I could talk with you forever. These are great questions. I want to ask each one of you the same question, because each one of you have a lot to say and know a lot more than I do in many things. So it would be wonderful to hear, We'll do it again.
Yeah. Yeah. Wonderful. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you.